leaders are really going to have to do some serious soul searching. And you ask, what do I got to do to get a raise around here? Get more sales. Why is the salesperson the only person who can get an answer to that question? Only 45% of employees strongly agree with the statement, I know what is expected of me in my job.
The assumption of loyalty stuck around a lot longer on the employee side than it did on the employer side.
You are so right about that.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Pick Now podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Munn. Today, we have Barry Wolfe, who is the president and CEO of Argos HR Solutions. Did I get that right, Barry?
You did, Jeff. Thank you.
All right, great. Welcome to the podcast. Looking forward to diving in deep on your journey and what you're up to now.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me, Jeff. Really excited to be with you and your audience.
Thank you. One of the first things I like to ask guests is, how did you come to entrepreneurship, and what on earth made you think you could be an entrepreneur?
Well, I had a role model. I grew up, I was very fortunate to have my parents. My dad was a very successful sales leader. Ran a sales organization for a large business in the 1970s in where I grew up in north central Pennsylvania, and he just got bored out of his mind and decided to leave, and so got a second mortgage without telling my mom. And
wow, okay,
he's one of those guys. And he had three other gentlemen join the business. One of whom was my grandfather, who had just retired, and Dad talked him back into starting the business. And so they started a manufacturing company. And I was 13 years old when I was there. I was one of the very first employees. I was working 60-hour weeks when I was 14, and I was driving a forklift.
Really?
Yeah, I was driving a forklift for I was old enough to drive a car. And but it was a fantastic way to grow up. In all honesty, it was learned a lot, and got to learn about business, and kind of at the dinner table, seeing the ups and downs of entrepreneurship, and so I was very fortunate with that. And I don't know how much of this you want to get into, but I worked there for a while after high school, and I toured for a couple of years with a musical group. Playing and singing and stuff like that.
I saw that in your bio. Yeah. So what do you play?
I play guitar.
Okay,
and
cool.
Yeah, and now I play in pit orchestras and high school musicals around the Pittsburgh area. But I back then, when I had more hair and so forth, I toured. I was home 2 weeks every 6 months for 2.5 years, and before I started college and that stuff. But I was going to do some stuff after college, and one day my dad called me in, and he said, "How'd you like to be the HR guy for our company?" And I really didn't know what that meant, but I thought, well, that sounds like fun, because I knew the business very well and the people there, which was how I got into HR. And they ended up selling the place after a number of years. Spent a little bit of time in the Fortune 500. I was my last day job. I was VP of HR for a nationwide engineering consulting business. And one day, like a lot of, I suppose, like other people, I was getting ready to go home, and I had the thought that thought of thoughts: if I got hit by a bus right now on the way home from work, would I say I've done everything I wanted to do professionally? And the question answered itself: no, I didn't. And so a friend of mine, a guy in my network who actually owns several Dale Carnegie franchises, and whom I've worked with over the years. Just after that little revelation, whatever, he gave me a call and said, "Hey, I know this is going to sound a little weird, but have you ever thought about doing consulting?" It was the right question at the right moment in my life. And I was like, well, do tell. And so I made the jump, and I've had my own business now for about almost 9 years. And doing, and it really, the exciting thing about it was, I mean, it's been good. It's been really good. I've had a good network already in the area, so getting to refer to clients and so forth. But along the way, I've learned, just from the various attaboys and bloody noses you get, in a career, dealing with employee challenges, and not being really satisfied with the way it's generally done. And
Mm,
over the years, I had a chance to um, build various types of talent management solutions, incorporating my own approaches around this. But being on my own really allowed me to dig deeper into, it's with a lot of people. I think with most people, you take this jump because you really believe you have something to offer the world, right? You believe
mhm.
there's a contribution that you have to make. And at my point, I was kind of realizing I'm not really making it. And once the business got more established and I was able to really um, dig a little deeper into what do I really think about these things, and what are the things that have frustrated me in terms of dealing with employee issues, helping leaders deal with them, um, and just how we attract people, how we develop them and pay them and so forth, and lead them, and why I just feel these things don't really do the job. And so that led me to really being able, actually, COVID, during that time, I
Yeah.
found myself with, shall we say, more time on my hands than I would have preferred to have. And so
I
it
think a
really
few of us
allowed
went through
me.
that. Yeah.
What's that? I'm sorry.
I think a few of us went through that.
Yeah, so I think your audience probably knows, has been there also at that time, but it allowed me to really uh, shut the door and think more seriously about kind of, okay, programmatically, how am I going to really wrap all this stuff up, and
Mhm.
put it into something that would do what I believe should be done. And a lot of it kind of went back to the kind of business my father had created and his partners, which was a magnificent place to work. And
Mm.
they were really, it was a business that was really, really invested in helping people become successful. And for a lot of reasons, you couldn't replicate it. But if I tried to think about it in terms of what would it take to create that approach, or help other businesses be able to create that aspiration of how do you really help your people, help your business succeed. The central
Yeah.
insight that I came across was, we focus so much on the duties of jobs, and we really should be focusing on the deliverables. And that was really kind of the impetus behind what I call value centric leadership, and the book that I recently published that touches on that topic. So it's kind of how I got, and here I am, and here we are.
How so I mean, I've worked across a lot of different industries in the course of my corporate career,
Hmm.
including, I was a law firm associate. I was a consulting firm partner.
Wow,
I worked in a couple larger organizations,
that's awesome.
and without naming any names, I'm not entirely convinced that every employer that I worked for really had that same interest that you're talking about. I do think there are a lot of industries and a lot of organizations that are just trying to extract the most that they can from their people.
It's a great
How,
word.
how, yeah, right? I mean, it's like, if I squeeze this
Yeah.
more, I can get more juice out of it.
Oh yeah.
How do you find people? I mean, is that a sort for you for who you want to work with? Is organizations who do want to have that kind of relationship with their employees?
Absolutely. Because you're absolutely right. Look, if I that's a great, the word was spot on. I'm gonna have to borrow that, Jeff, but I'll make sure I credit you for that in the future. But yeah, if they just want to get what they can out of the people that they pay, you know that's what I'm talking about. Really isn't going to be for them. But
Right.
I will say I've been fortunate, even in corporate America, to work for some really impressive leaders, both in terms of professionally and just as people, and people who really did, like my dad and his partners, really did want to, um, help people. I'll say, kind of give them give them the opportunities to have the same, internal rewards for success that caused them to start the business. And how, and so it's beyond just equity, in terms of giving people a piece of the
Yeah.
success. But but I would also say that if you've ever read Peter Drucker, and anybody listening, if you haven't read Peter Drucker, read anything he wrote because it's all amazing.
Right.
But
Yeah.
in one of his earlier books, the book is The Effective Executive. He says in there, a manager's success or failure is wholly dependent upon his abilities to accomplish his objectives through others. And that's one of the things that's really resonated with me over the years. That whether we become managers because we became successful individual contributors at a certain point, right? But the simple reality is, when you spend any time in senior management roles and you're kind of evaluating who's really helping make the business successful and who isn't, so often much more often than not, it comes back to the fact that, look, you can complain about your people all you want, but the fact is, if they fail, you fail. And so if you're serious about wanting to become successful, you really do have to come back to, how do you help them become successful? Because their success is your success. So if you want to do it on the kind of utilitarian level, I think that maybe you're referencing there.
Yeah.
I don't know how you're going to make it, but
yeah, utilitarian, transactional, however you want to put it, right?
Right.
Yeah, and one of the things that I will push the people that I coach on is, when they're complaining about their team or not being able to find good people, it's like, well, how are you creating that?
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up, Jeff, because I have to tell you, one of the things post-COVID, I've never, you kind of read these sociological things about business, about various generations in the workplace. And I don't know, I was firing potheads on weed in the early 90s who didn't much care about anything. I don't know how much any of that stuff is real. But I will say that I think that maybe your corporate America experience was like mine. I mean, I was in the Fortune 500 in the early 2000s, where we were shipping a lot of jobs out to China, and I was involved in in that kind of experience, and in certain cases, gutting certain local economies, frankly, in that process. And I've had leadership programs where I've had I can't remember which one it is. Folks in their 20s, if that's Gen Z or Y, I can't keep up. But anyway, folks from those, but in that, whose parents, who grew up in households whose parents, lost their jobs, really good jobs, for in the interest of shipping things to China, and who had to supplement those incomes with multiple jobs, or in many cases could not replace that level of income. And I think you look at something like that, and I think that many of us, I'll say, of our generation, who didn't grow up in that, I've become convinced, and we've really underestimated the impact that has had on people. And for that matter, not that I want to get to politics, honestly, but if you think about the way the economy has gone, and how, one woman in one of my programs shared, in that age group, shared how she and her sister were raised by their single mom, who had a night job working in a warehouse for Walmart. I mean, in this day and age, that's unthinkable. You can't possibly do that. And so I really think we are coming, and I didn't go into this kind of work, if you will, or these kind of thoughts, intending to carry this kind of message, but I've learned it just from talking to these people, that, I really think we're at an interesting point in management, where leadership, however you want to call it, where we have to we talk about, how do we attract people again, and to your point about these leaders that are saying people today don't care. I think we have to look at that experience they grew up in, and we have to ask, well, why should they? Because their parents care, and they got
Yeah.
fried.
Right.
And those kids are, those people have grown up in the legacy of that. And I have to say, the more I've reflected on it, the more I'm surprised at how we really haven't, the management world. And I'll just kind of, we're so busy regurgitating the same empty platitudes about, I don't know, pick a topic for the last 40 years, really, that we haven't stepped back to realize, this is a very dramatically different environment for people in the workplace than maybe we've ever had since the Industrial Revolution. I don't think that's an overstatement. And I really think, if we're going to be attracting and retaining and developing people these days, leaders are really going to have to do some serious soul searching, like most of them have never done, like they're not trained to do, and to be honest, in certain levels that they don't necessarily have the inclination for. I mean, most CEOs are not known for deep, sustained reflection. You know what I mean? But I really think we're going to have it, and we're going to have to be going back and asking, really, honestly, you want people to come and care about your company? Why should they? I
Yeah,
mean,
I
really.
think that's such an important question. And I the thing that surprises me, Barry, isn't that we got here, it's that how long it took us to get here. So,
Wow, what a point.
I came up in like just as pension plans were starting to go away. I
Yeah,
joined a law firm as the partnership structure began to change. And so there was, there were these deals, right? You work here and we will take care of you. And that
yeah.
showed up differently in different places, but it got chipped away, chipped away, chipped away. And the mentality of the employee, I think, stuck the assumption of loyalty stuck
Mhm.
around a lot longer on the employee side than it did on
You
the employer side.
you are so right about that. You are so right about that. And in talks, to your point about this is where we are today. I've said to business leaders, if you want to understand where you're really at on loyalty, when you get back to your office, go get your employee handbook and pull out your your welcome message, or somewhere
Yeah.
at least in page one of the policies. And I will bet a lot of money that it's going to sound something like this. Hey, welcome to our company. We're so super excited to have you here. We've got this great tradition, and we're really, looking forward to your contributions to the team. Oh, by the way, we can fire you at any time we want, and we don't even need a reason. But hey, we're really, really
Right.
glad you're here. I mean, just stop and think about that.
It's the basis of an abusive relationship right there.
Exactly it. That's perfect. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And
Yeah,
everybody,
it's like this is completely one way. We expect you to give everything, and we can pull it all away at the drop
yeah,
of a hat
anytime we want.
because
Have a great
we
life
found
here.
a cheaper option either overseas or
Yes,
through software or through AI or whatever.
yeah,
Right?
yes,
Yeah.
exactly right, exactly right. And to those businesses, who persist in that,
Mhm.
and I've talked to again, like various business owners who bring those frustrations, but bring that concept of the relationship with their employees, to the table. All I can say is, well, hey, good luck with that. I mean, seriously, because you're. What do you think? It isn't even a question of more money anymore, to some sense,
Right.
because the ability to throw, is no better than it was before we were shipping. The ability to do that is really no better than it
Mhm.
was when we started shipping all those jobs to China, right? So it's going to have to be something else, and otherwise, just get used to people, you know, following through. Finally, as you put it, I love that. On the ramifications of that being the deal, and they're going to move on. Well, why shouldn't they? We actually are at a point right now, where I believe I say this in the first part of the introduction of my book, and um, but I think according to 2024 U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the median employee tenure is something like 6 years, which is the lowest it's been, I believe, in over 20 some
Wow.
years. So
Yeah.
uh, all of those forces, like you started to point out, we have to see that as, yeah, this is the logical outcome of just, you know, of changing all that. And it is catching up. And guess what? It's not
Mhm.
real. It's not working out very well for employers either. So,
So, how are you advising your clients and helping your clients to keep people?
well, my program to address that is something I call value centric leadership, and it's really
Mhm.
about it's rooted in this idea of helping people succeed. And if we think about the way to do that, is really about focusing them. First of all, understand what does the business, what does success mean for the organization, but not in
Mhm.
terms of the aspirational, flowing, highfalutin language that integrity and the core values and all that stuff, but
Yeah.
really thinking about it in terms of what's the value this organization is here to create, and what
Mhm.
is and what are the results you produce by which you're creating that value. And then
Mhm.
looking at jobs before you get to the job descriptions and the duties and the bachelor's degree and 5 years experience and all that stuff, but understanding what does this job exist to deliver, and
Mhm.
that helps you produce those organizational results that result in value. And when I say value creation, I don't just mean it to your customers, but also thinking about it to your investors, to your bank, because
Yeah.
everybody looks for different. They're looking for value in different things, right? Your bank doesn't care about your Austin customer service any more than your customers care about your fabulous cash flow, right? So you really have to
Right.
look at it in that 360 sort of view. And the key is thinking about it, all of those, again, not in terms of duties, but in terms of deliverables. And I think of it as, it's not the verbs, it's the nouns, because nobody buys
Mm.
a noun,
Mhm.
or excuse me, nobody buys a verb. We pay for the
Yeah.
noun. So we think about it,
Right.
so we want to think about that, even driving that down to employees. We pay people to do activities, if you will, but we should be wanting to buy results from them. And when you
Right.
start thinking about it that way, you're able to start understanding, well, what are the things then that I really value from this job or from that job? Where do they really plug in to my organization? And then you're on the path to really being able to help them become successful in their business, to go home and feel good about what they do all day because of what, the way you do, because you're understanding that contribution. In fact, one of the things I advocate for my clients is that we don't call, everybody's got their substitute term for employees, right? Team members or whatever,
Yeah.
associates. In this world, I propose that you call people contributors, because isn't that
Uh-huh.
what you want them to be? Isn't that what they better
Right.
be, right?
Right.
So and as a way of illustrating this, I have a chapter in my book. It's called what every new employee wants to ask and almost no employer can answer. And I point out how, day one, when somebody starts, HR departments the world over, we have these hyper detailed checklists, for the first day onboarding, so we get everything super right and we get off on the right foot. So we make sure we tell them, the chocolate bar with the balloon on it and a welcome card is on the desk, and we show them here's where the pens are, and here's where the creamer is, and here's where we all meet for ice cream on Fridays and all that stuff. But there's one question everybody has when they start a job, and they don't ask it because they don't think anybody's really going to give them an answer. And I'll ask business groups, I've done this for a couple of years now, and I'll ask them, what do you think that question is? In all the times I've done that, there's one guy, his name is Zach. He's in his early 20s. He's the only guy I ever got the question right. But everybody, they get a shot here and there, and it comes close sometimes. But I tell groups, I promise you, when you hear my answer, 100% of you are going to agree with me that this is the question.
Mm.
So again, they fumble a bit. So I'll tell them, this is the question everybody has. What do I got to do to get a raise around here? And the
Uh-huh.
whole group laughs. And
Yeah.
and I point out, if you're a salesperson and you want to ask that, if you're starting day one in a sales job and you ask, what do I got to do to get a raise around here? And I'll say, quick, what's the answer? Everybody in the room will say, get more sales. Of course, that's
Yeah.
the answer.
Sell more. Yeah.
Why is the salesperson the only person in your entire organization who can get an answer to that question. And I used to think for years, when I would chew on this, I used to think, well, I've always worked for the boss, including, my dad. I grew up with the boss at one point. And, hey, they just don't really like to get boxed in on commitments about raises real early. You don't know how somebody's going to work out. You know how the year's going to go, things like that. So they just always want to kind of skirt around that. I used to think that was really the issue. But when I reflect on it in the context of what we were talking about in terms of value creation, it's helped me to understand that there's a much deeper answer to that. And the reason they don't give that answer is because they really don't know. They really don't know what different people can do up front to get a raise around here. And that's where, in years when I would think about like creating, various talent management solutions. And, I got very interested in thinking about how do we show somebody day one, if you want to move forward in this business, these are, laying it out and that's where I've kind of followed this through into my value-centric leadership process. I have a tool we call success maps it really is the replacement for a performance appraisal. Where you can show people these are the deliverables in this job, and each one of those have like gradations of contribution. So like this is what fully successful looks like, not average, fully successful. You give us this, we're super happy. If you go to this level, boy, that's above and beyond, that's exceeding it. If you really want to blow the doors off, you want to impress somebody, give us to this level. But it's all about, it's not what you do. It's what are you going to, you put these things in somebody's hand. You leave these things on the desk when you go home at night. You change these things out in the wider world. And then at the other end of the spectrum, of course, it's, this is not so good. And here's one where if you're down here, like if we don't get this fixed, you're probably not going to be working here much longer. So, and this is, like I say, the basis instead of a performance review, because one of the things I noticed over the years, we talk about, traditional performance appraisals. And for years, people are saying we should throw them out. They can't be fixed and all that stuff. Well, but if you look at so many of them, what are you appraising? And it's things like initiative and commitment to quality, and things like it. It's like,
right. Do people like working with you? Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this stuff gets into, this is not performance. This is a psychological profile. So we're asking managers to like look into the soul, if you will, and come up with some judgment about some abstract quality, and again, who buys this? What customer's paying for this? So, and because we're looking at it, through this lens of applied psychology that got into the workplace. And then if we build the right person or we mold the right person, then we're going to get what? Well, that's the question. We're going to get what? What? But it's all just this sort of focus, and not anything that anybody in the wider world actually could care less about, frankly.
So if you're working with an organization, and how big are your typical clients, Barry? Like how large an organization?
They're between 50 and north of 100 somewhere, I guess I could say at this point.
So these, they don't have their own departments for this. Like you and I were talking beforehand, about kind of Fortune 500 experience, and there are HR departments who have teams of people who kind of try to figure this stuff out. And the organizations that you're talking about, and I work with a lot of the same kinds of organizations, 50 to 100 people, sometimes smaller, sometimes a little bigger.
Yeah.
How do you like asking the question, how do I know you're doing a good job? Depending on the company and what the company actually does, like, are people able to define that? And how hard a task is that?
Yeah, it's hard. It's one of the things again, like I talk about this in my book, I talk about with clients, it takes.
So let me stop you just for a second, because you haven't said the name of your book, and we'll put it in the show notes, but I want to make sure that people know your book and how to get it and all that good stuff.
God bless you. How did I not say that myself at this point? But thank you for that. Yeah. This far in, and I haven't said the title. The book is called "It's All in Your Head," and the subtitle is "Why Psychology Doesn't Help Your Employees Deliver Value and What Can."
Okay,
That's
good,
the title.
good. Yeah.
I try to get
Yeah.
it
So
short, but
how, yeah, like that issue of defining value, right?
yeah,
And then linking that to specific tasks.
right. We
Yeah.
we the first step in the process is working with the senior leader, um, or as few of the senior leadership as possible, honestly, to
Hmm.
identify, to answer those couple of questions. First of all, what are the key drivers of value in your organization? And then
Yeah.
thinking about what are the results in your business by which you're producing that, you're delivering on that value. And it's a series of it's kind of an iterative process. Usually, I don't think we've gotten it done with less than 7 sessions. They're supposed to be an hour, but they always go 2. And it's like a therapy
Wow.
session, to tell you the truth, where we get into we start with just tell me about the business. Tell me about
Hmm.
why did you get this started? What do
Yeah.
you what do you want to how do you want to be different in your marketplace? What did you want for yourself? Because it goes back to, again, like
Hmm.
those financial goals and things like that, the operational thing. Um, and also, what do you want for your people, even your community, if you want to go there. And so we take those things and we translate it into then. So what are those things that are, again? So what does your organization put in people's hands, leave on the desk, on the floor, change in the wider world? And
Right.
so it's about noun phrases, really. It's not there's really no verbs. So it's this thing that has these characteristics,
Hmm.
because that's what people buy. That's what people give you money
Hmm.
for. And it can
Hmm.
also include like financial goals. Some and it they can go numbers if they want. Sometimes it's just kind of more. We just kind of describe financial goals that let us do these kind of things. And sometimes it's like, we want cost of goods sold here. Okay, well, let's go there.
Yeah.
Um, and then again, defining those results that in the business and driving those into then creating the success maps. That's where a lot of really hard thinking comes from, to tell you the truth. And it's a lot of back and forth. And I'm talking with a guy potentially coming into my organization to help me create these. And we have kind of I'll say a library, we're assembling of these, but you can't just sort of pull them out, because you've got to really listen to what these people are about. So you can kind of have it off to the side, but boy, you just really have to be very careful about listening to them. So I take a lot of notes. I go back and if it's nice out, I go to a park in the afternoons where I can just, no phone, and just, work
Yeah.
on drafts of these things. And we come back and then we kind of shape them as we go. And, so yeah, it's very hard thinking, and but I one of the things I early on in the process, when I'm introducing this to the leadership team, the first I use some slides, and my first one's a cake, and it's this
Mm.
award-winning cake I found some lady in Tennessee baked, and she won some big award for it. And I'll ask the group, what do you think is uh, the most difficult thing about creating this cake? And so somebody will say, well, the icing looks hard, or the decorating, or maybe the cake itself. And I'll point out, I know nothing about baking, but I know what the hardest thing about it is to make this cake. The answer is, the hardest thing is coming up with the recipe. And,
Mm.
it took this award-winning super expert to come up with this thing. And she had to put a lot of trial and error into this thing, I'm sure. But once you have it, you, it makes it easier for everybody else. So, but the key is you got to do the hard thinking up front. But when you have that, everything else gets easier. And it's the same thing with success maps. So when you create these, your subordinate leaders have a much more effective roadmap for interacting with their people, about knowing what does success look like in your role, and where are you falling
Hmm.
down. And when you're thinking about it in terms of those unarguable concrete things, it's just so much easier for a manager than to start thinking about, how do I help you, correct the problems, and help you get to deliver, in the to the way that the organization needs. And I have some, developmental stuff around doing that. But in this sort of context. So yeah, it's
As I,
it's not easy coming out of the gate.
yeah, as I think about my time as an employee, it would have been really nice to know a lot of that stuff. Because
Yeah.
I mean, as I kind of came up in organizations, and you get more and more senior roles, and those roles get much more ambiguous in
Yeah.
terms of how do you actually do a good job.
That's right. That's right. I have never
And
had a job
sometimes you're
description.
creating it, right? You're
Oh
like,
yeah.
well, I'm deciding that this is the way I do a good job, and I'm going to go with this until I'm told otherwise.
Yeah.
And
It's
then
very true.
you get laid off from your job with no explanation, and you don't
Yeah.
really ever find out whether you did it. I went from like getting the president's award to getting laid off in a year. Like,
Of
how
course
does
you
that
did.
happen?
Of course you did.
Yeah.
I have no doubt a sizable percentage of your audience right now is laughing and nodding emphatically as well. Is because like, yeah, me too. That's my story. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Well,
but here's
and I think that explains a lot of, some of the, like, we can talk about what makes people want to be entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
Some of it is a sense of, I do think, and I run into this all the time. I mean, I work with a lot of overachievers. I'm a recovering overachiever myself. This desire to like prove yourself, prove
Yeah,
yourself,
yeah,
prove yourself, right? And
yeah,
that's a strong drive, and it will ultimately exhaust you, and you have to find different ways to motivate yourself. But that's a different
yeah, yeah,
topic. I do think for a lot of high achievers, um, the ambiguity of what success looks like in a large organization is like, why would I want to be at the whims of that when I could go off
yeah,
and do my own thing? Like, you decided to go off and do your own thing, and not only that, but like do what in your mind is, and I agree, I'm not saying it's just in your mind, like solving some problems with the current system, saying, hey,
yeah,
what are we doing? We're doing this wrong.
yeah, yeah. I one of the things um, to me there's a survey datum that to me is the most important in the history of employment ever. I mean, if we want to understand the problem, you could think about.
Yeah.
I'll proceed this with a little bit of number stuff. So every year, employers spend about $90 billion on leadership development. That's grounded in usually in various approaches of applied psychology. We spend about $2 billion a year on personality testing. We build competency models at about $150,000 a pop and upward to
Wow.
make better people. And yet
Yeah.
we've got, as I mentioned, in 2024, U.S. Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor Statistics said median employee tenure is its lowest, and I think it's 22 years. We have
Uh-huh.
30% of employees consider themselves highly engaged at work. And
Yeah.
according to a McKinsey report, 90% of executives said that their leadership development programs are ineffective at meeting the organization's leadership needs. And so, while we're focused on, defining these abstractions about people and measuring them and so forth, the Gallup organization in 2024, in their their annual workforce state of the workforce survey, excuse me, they reported a number which isn't that different from other years. But this just blows my mind when you think about that backdrop of all that spending and emphasis that we're doing. They reported in 2024 that only 45% of employees strongly agree with the statement, I know what is expected of me in my job. So
Wow.
if you think about it, even if all that stuff was real and it's true, and there's a lot of evidence to say that it's not, but even if
Yeah.
it was, I mean, how could it possibly matter if over half the workforce doesn't even know what the heck you want out of them? And I will just tell you, I have been I've been in the human resources world now for 35 years, and 25 almost, over 25 years in corporate America. I have been part of bazillions of examples of bringing in what we thought was a really fabulous person, and then within a
Hmm.
year, giving them a severance package because they're just not really working out. And I would
Yeah.
think for years, what is going on here? What are we missing? And I will honestly tell you, when we think about, you find all kinds of uh, th- uh, diagnoses about why people fail in jobs. But I will tell you the single biggest reason, and this is true, the further up you go, the truer this is. The single biggest reason why people fail in jobs is because the people that put them in there didn't even know what the hell they really want out of it in the first place. And it's not a
Yeah.
question. They talk about, I want this kind of person. Okay, that's
Right.
later. That's, I need a bachelor's in 5 years experience. No, 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 no. 12
Right.
months. This is the way I preach it in terms of like what I call the most important question in hiring. Before you even start getting into the job description, whatever, come up with it, write down the answer to this question. What are the 3 to 5? And this is not, I tweaked it a bit. A guy named Lou Adler is the guy who came up with this. What are the 3 to 5 value-added deliverables this person has to accomplish in the first 12 months on the job? So 12 months after they start with you, when you walk in to do their annual performance review, what do you want them, again, to have left on the table, to put in your hand, changed out in the wider world? Start there. And no one does.
Right.
And trying to get, when I've worked with managers, trying to get them there is like pulling teeth. I want somebody who's got this kind. No. We're paying for that stuff. What are we buying?
Right.
Why should the company want this? And I would imagine a lot of your folks, by the way, could relate to this as well, including yourself. We have a business world where business owners will subject managers to the equivalent of the Spanish Inquisition over a one-time $20,000 CapEx purchase, but yet we'll shovel, they'll shovel, multiples of that every year on these idiotic approaches to management and employee development. And it never changes anything. And they just keep doing it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And and fortunes are made, and growing every year on all that stuff, and nobody challenges.
Well, it's so easy to poke holes in all this stuff. I mean, so I'm thinking about it from a couple perspectives. One is, there's this adage, hire for attitude, train for skill.
Yeah,
so we don't have a good, from the conversations you've had and the tools you've looked at, we don't really have a good way of hiring for attitude.
No,
it's just interpersonal relationship and gut feel. And we do a horrible job at training for skill once we get them in.
You better believe it.
So it's like we're failing on both fronts.
Exactly. But I will also say this, and I get the message behind hire for attitude.
Yeah.
But one of the things I've learned, this is not new. The way I express it, you'll hear it different ways, but the 8s of the world don't work for 5s. So you can hire somebody with a great attitude, but if you're going to put them under a mediocre leader, I mean, you're just wasting it,
Yeah.
So I really, really believe that we can talk about, the thing about an attitude, if you will, hiring for it. You're hiring for a potential, but it's a question of what are you going to be able to leverage that appropriately,
Right.
so that person is going to keep that attitude and apply it, meaningfully in your organization. And I really don't know another way to do that other than making it perfectly clear to them about what are the things we value. And if you deliver on these, there's, there's something in it for you. So I think you're still.
Yeah. One of the things that one of the concepts that I teach to my clients is it's very close. It's a much less technical and refined version of what you're talking about, Barry, but I call it, and I learned it from one of my coaches, a guy named Steve Chandler. It's expectations versus agreements. And that so much of what we run into in the world is that I have an unstated expectation of what you need to be doing in your job.
Yeah.
But we never actually make it explicit and talk about it. And you never get any input on it. Like I have this model in my head and I'm judging you against it. You don't even know what it is.
Yeah. We're speaking the same language, really. Yeah. Yeah. It's the same thing. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, And I don't really, you don't know what it is. And I'm not sure I know what it is. I sort of know it up there, but,
Right.
I'll know for sure if I'm not happy, other than that.
Exactly. I won't necessarily be able to
Yeah,
tell you why I'm not
yeah,
happy. It's like, Barry, I really need you to improve. It's like,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
tell me a little bit about how I would do that. It's like,
Yep,
well,
yep, exactly. Well, you just gotta, this just not so much. I
it's
actually,
just going to go the extra mile, Barry.
yeah, the extra mile. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I need you to commit more. Oh, to what? Well, to the goals. Really.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let's get on, because I know you have a lot to say about some of the various tools that we use to
Yeah,
assess people going in or while they're in a job, and like
yeah.
I have my own rant against those. I would love to hear yours. We can compare rants.
Great. Well, this is like pretty much the first half of my book, by the way, is
Hmm.
is really looking at actually the story of how applied psychology got into the workplace. And my
Oh,
editor
wow.
had actually said she edited one of Jack Welch's book, in fact, and she said, I don't think anybody's ever told this story anywhere. So I spent about 2 years working on this book, and a lot of that was in the research.
Hmm.
And my bibliography has 550 citations. So I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but I've really done my homework in this whole thing, and it's a fascinating story. The Just to kind of give you a little, and you'll have to. I can go on a lot about this stuff, so it's hard to. So feel free to discipline me, okay? But
Okay.
it actually got in during World War One. A psychologist who was studying intelligence at Harvard um,
Hmm.
convinced the War Department that they should be testing for intelligence with recruits to get
Hmm.
better quality recruits, weed out the bad ones. And so there was a lot of misgivings about it in the all the way through the army, actually. But they and the guys that were developing these things weren't really, they had no actual theory of intelligence they were testing for. They would ask questions
Really?
like, yeah, they would ask questions like identifying a character in an advertising campaign, or identify which car uses a night engine. Well, of course, if you're an immigrant just off the boat from Eastern Europe, you have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there were all
Yeah.
these kinds of problems with it, but in any event, there was a guy who was part of this team that, just as the war was ending up, was connected with the guy who um, uh, ran World Book Company. If you remember World Book Encyclopedias,
World Book
okay,
Encyclopedia?
yeah, that guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he was one of the first guys to recognize there's a potential gold mine in this after the war, because we had, in those days, we had very strident labor movements, and the wars, it was only exacerbated by the war with the draft, and so it's men going overseas. So the idea that employers could come up with this, just a paper and pencil test that could help them,
Uh-huh.
weed out the troublemakers before they ever get on the payroll, was just, it was too good to ignore. So
Right.
it became very, very popular very soon after the end of the war. And however, by the 20s, there was a lot of just flat out charlatanism that infiltrated all this stuff. And by the 20s, a lot of it was being shown, and none of it's really working. So
Uh-huh.
a substantial majority of companies that were adopting these things were dropping them, but it was kind of like, it was enough to create the vision of El Dorado, if you will. Boy, if we can
Hmm.
make this happen, and one of the things that along these lines that really surprised me associated with this, when I was doing the research, I had figured this all got into the workplace like by a bunch of mushy headed HR people like me, and it wasn't. In fact, it was enthusiastically, wholeheartedly adopted, and continues to be, by senior executives, CEOs. They love this stuff. I got a chance once to talk at a Vistage group, and I was talking to the
Hmm.
guy that runs the group, and he was saying, he was asking, what do you want to talk about? I said, well, I'd like to talk about, my value-centric leadership process and about the problems of psychology in the workplace and the problems of like personality testing. And he listened to me for a bit and he says, don't talk about that because most of these people are big believers in that. So,
Right.
but there are, just to, I could go on a lot about this, but one of the most popular is the ocean, the big five personality types for extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, et cetera, et
Is
cetera.
this the conscientiousness and neuroticism?
Yeah, all that
and
stuff. Yeah, all that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Don't tell me that one doesn't work. I thought that was the one that had the most research behind it.
Well, it's got a lot, but it's also one bit of research that they don't really want to talk about. The Journal of Personnel Psychology and one other related U.S. organization found the correlation between those test scores and workforce success was something like 0.07. So it's like, even if it's real,
the model has been validated. It's the application of the model that doesn't work in that case. Because a lot of these models haven't really been validated, right? Like Myers-Briggs, for example.
Oh yeah, Myers-Briggs was created by two women, very hardworking women, but they had exactly. Catherine Briggs was a fangirl, literally. Really, I'm not being unkind. She was of Carl Jung, and
Jung,
yeah, and she came up with this, and her daughter kind of turned it into the test. It's used by like 90% of the Fortune 500, and but psychologists will even recognize. I mean, the results are meaningless. There was no statistical application to anything, for example. But even among so much of these other ones, we have one thing they don't like to talk about a lot is that in the world of applied psychology, a lot of people recognize that since the outset, there's been a phenomenon. The technical term is faking, where if people are looking for a certain outcome, they'll just answer in a way that they think is going to give them the result they want. And there's been, again, the editors of the Journal of Personnel Psychology had done a couple of papers around this, got kind of taken to the woodshed by some of their peers by it, where they showed that, like, a literature search showed there's a lot of papers generated around the problems of faking. And nobody really knows what to do about it. So it's acknowledged it's a real problem, but no one knows what to do. And here's an amusing little thing. I'll throw one out by name because I name them in the book, I guess. But the predictive index, which is also a very, very popular personality test.
I've got clients that use predictive index.
I'm sure you do. A lot of people do. They have an entire page of their website devoted to this question of faking, and they'll say things like, "Well, actually faking," I love this. They say, "This is an adaptive behavior." I'm quoting here pretty much. "This is an adaptive behavior that helps people get along in the workplace." Well, and my next part of my book talking about that is I say, well, in my extensive HR career, pardon my use of French for this, we call that bullshitting. And that's a behavior that helps people get fired, I mean, but in any event, they'll say that actually
it can help people. I mean, we all know people who have, to use your term, bullshitted their way to the top. So bullshitting can be a valuable skill.
Yes, it is.
At least in terms of the individual success, not necessarily organizational success.
Right. But to the extent that this goes up to a person's integrity, in a test, it's kind of like, wow, really? Oh, it's adaptive behavior. Oh, that's what that is. Lying is adaptive. Okay. But but I also point out, though, they say in there, our test is such that you really can't fake it. There's no way to cheat on ours. Okay, great. Well, then, that being the science and everything, I'm sure they won't mind my telling you that as of, the writing of my book, there's a gentleman on YouTube named Mr. Bahroz Abbas Hussein. And he has a series of videos that shows you how to cheat on a predictive index. And they know it because he makes reference to this, by the way. He's gotten grief from that. But he shows you how to figure out from a job which predictive index personality profiles are they going to be most likely looking for. And he'll give you the exact scores that you need to get this. And if you look, one of his videos had over 300,000 views in 1 year. And you go down his comments, he's booking. He has a very robust volume of bookings he's getting on this. But he's on YouTube. There's a lot of other companies out there that will show you how to cheat on that one and gazillions of others for $90 to $100 a pop. So personality test faking is not just a problem. This is a growth market we're in here,
Right.
But here's, I don't know how much more you want to talk about this, because although it's all in my book, but the other one of the things that's rather amusing, if I could just share this with you. So in the 1950s, there was a guy, a psychologist, who made up a personality test, and he gave this to three different groups of people. The first was a group of supervisors who were taking a course in human relations. He gave them the test and he asked them, how many of you think this describes you like really amazingly accurate or pretty accurate or half and half or whatever? So I think the number was like 55% said it was accurate or amazingly accurate. Then he gave it to a group of, I'm sorry, the first group was, that was a group of college students. Then he gave it to a group of supervisors. And the accuracy was something like 70-some%. Then he gave it, he went to a convention of personnel managers. And they considered this, 90% of them considered it accurate or amazing. And the funny thing was, everybody got exactly the same test, the same results. All three groups,
the same,
no matter which one, they got the same thing.
It's like horoscopes.
Yeah. Oh, it really is. Yeah. And he, by the way, he published the results in a paper called "The Gullibility of Personnel Managers."
Oh yeah. Well, everyone wants to think there's an easy answer.
That's exactly it. That's exactly what I say. I mean, why is this? The appeal is it offers easy answers to very, very difficult questions.
Yeah, here you've made it easy so that I don't have to think about this thing.
That's
I can just use disk or it's not. We're not picking on one of them. We're picking on all of them. The thing that gets me about them, Barry, first of all, they assume that you have something called a personality or a character that is consistent from moment to moment, and we know in different situations we're different, so that's out the window. And the other thing, the thing that no one has figured out how to test for is the problem isn't, I'm going to say you, but it's me too, it's not on a day-to-day basis that we have problems. It's when we get in an uncomfortable situation and we get triggered and our childhood shit shows up or whatever. You say something that reminds me of my father and I go off on you. You can't test for that.
No.
You can't trigger someone and then test them.
No, that's exactly right. You're 100% right.
And those are the people who get into trouble and get flushed out of organizations. You know, it's like they blew up at someone, they did something inappropriate. I mean, there are people who are just kind of incompetent over time because they don't have the skills or we don't have the capacity to tell them how to do their jobs or both.
Yes.
But I mean, I don't know. It's a fascinating area, isn't it?
Oh, it really is. It really is. And, it's funny how we get, we think of these business people as, serious and realists, and you got to, really hyper pragmatic and everything else. But when it comes to this stuff, there's just, and I got more. I mean, I got a couple 100 pages of this stuff. If you really want to suck it up, going back over 100 years of how we buy into this stuff. One of the little amusing thing is how we talk about learning styles in the workplace. Trainers,
right?
And, academics and so forth. But it's all in the business world as well. And you can buy, $100 a pop or so. You can buy a diagnostic to identify learning styles and so forth.
Yeah, I'm audio kinesthetic. Right?
Yeah, exactly. But it's all nonsense. It's a complete myth. Yeah, it's based on a dopey theory and with a stupid test that was come up with an educator in Australia came up with 13 questions. Again, that lovely paper and pencil test that gives you all these insights. and it's accepted as gospel in academics among academics all over the world. But it is shown repeatedly that there is no such thing as a preferred learning style. We all learn what's called multimodally. We hear it, we
Yeah.
practice it, we read about whatever, and and that's how everybody everywhere learns. And this whole thing is nonsense. But again, huge amounts of dollars being spent on this every year, and nobody questions it. It's known very well
made me
in
think
psychology.
I need to develop a tool like this, Barry, because there's money to be had in it, right?
Well, that's exactly it.
If I say it with enough confidence.
Yeah, that's exactly it. They want to, look, we like I say in the introduction of the book, science is like sex; it sells. And everybody, if it like it used to be, if it was God, well, that was the end of the argument. If it was, now if it's science, well, that's it. Then I'll write the check because it's science, and nobody really cares to look behind. Well, what exactly do you mean by science? And is it really science the way you think it's science? The way the marketing makes it sound like it's science?
Right. And who funded the research?
Yeah, exactly. And it's I will tell you, if you look at your audience, if you go to the Amazon reviews, most of them are actually from business people, and so many of them will just say, I had people call me, it was like, I never knew any of this, I never heard any of this. It's like, no, so I wrote this book because nobody's earned this.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's just, I'm thinking about a review. You could just post the facepalm emoji and there you have it, right? It's like,
yeah, there actually is a reviewer. Okay. One of the reviews was a psychologist who said, I've been in this world for years, and this guy's absolutely right. This is all nonsense.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Hey, Barry, can I ask you one? So you obviously bring a lot of passion to this. You've been doing this for years. As you think about your journey as an entrepreneur, like, tell me about a moment where you didn't know if it was going to work out and you stuck it out anyway, and what kept you going? Because there are a lot of people who have this like passion and drive, and then they run into stuff and they go back to a W-2 job, or they think, oh, it's not going to work. But you've stuck it out.
And you only want one of those moments. But but you know what I mean. But no,
I mean, you run into, I run into them too. Like, it's not, it can be monthly sometimes.
Yeah. Though it really, I hate to make it sound, well, I don't know how else to say it, I guess, any other way. But, I had a great day job, and I was making really good money and all that stuff. I got 6 kids and all that stuff. My wife was less than thrilled with this. I mean, God bless her I'm taking her to Italy next month because I owe her, for putting up with this. But, I left in the first place because I just really, it's more than just, I really believed I have something to offer. I mean, I've watched enough mistakes. I've participated in so many of these things over and over again that just don't work. And I've thought a lot about this. I've read a lot about it. I've worked on these things, and I really believe in what I'm talking about here. I mean, I really believe this. I mean, I don't want to just sell stuff. I want to change the world. I really want people to just step back and say, there's a better way to do this. This is garbage. This is just, nobody could acknowledge this is all working. And we're at a point right now. I mean, read business books. We're just drowning in platitudes. And, when you sit there, I could share with you stories with employees who have had problems with their managers and in tears. I mean, grown men, senior people who are just being crushed by the way we manage every day, all the time. And, we're just, like I said, there's people like you and me out the yin yang in this world, telling everybody what's wrong, and so much of it is, and really, you and I could talk a lot more about this because I think we're kind of kindred spirits. It sounds like in a lot of ways here, but
Yeah.
so much of this stuff, it's the same garbage people have been churning out, for decades, and and it's not helping. It just, and I really believe that just if we can, we need, and really we need this at this point in the history of post-industrial revolution, world, whatever. We're at a point where we really do need to go back and ask harder, more fundamental questions. And that's the thing. It's not the reason I call the book "It's All in Your Head" is because these answers are not, they're not quick fixes somebody can sell you. They're not one more set of hyper motivating platitudes that we're just, like I said, we're drowning in that garbage. I'm sorry. We've had enough of it. But it's about you going back to the really hard thinking about what the hell am I really trying to do in this world? What am I trying to put in different people's hands? How am I going to know that that's there? And how do I help people give me that so we can give that to the rest of the world? And it's not clever tests or whatever. It's you really thinking about these things. And if you'll do that, where I know, where managers are able to answer those, even just in the context we have today, they are able to really help people do what deliver what the business needs them to deliver, and go home at nights feeling good about themselves. Like there's some dignity to what they do or whatever. Like there's meaning to it. But it's not all just feel good rah stuff. It's really freaking hard thinking. That detailed stuff that nobody likes to do.
Yeah, exactly. That's what that's, to me, that's I had another guest on who's an AI expert. And her question is, when we have AI, who are we?
Yeah.
And I think, AI is letting us avoid hard thinking too. That's how people are using it, right?
Yes.
Like we will do anything to avoid thinking about hard things.
Yes. And I will tell you, if I could on that, my editor said, you got to write something about AI. And I said, well, I really don't know what to say that is going to be worth knowing in 6 months. But I did do a lot of thinking about it. And I will tell you one thing, the research I did on my book, because a lot of it deals with just, intelligence testing, as part of, in addition to personality and the rest of this stuff. And one of the things I learned, as a result of that research was that, after, let's say about 150 years of people attempting to scientifically understand it, I think the prospects for general AI are about nil. And the reason I say that is because what that's shown me is that we don't know what intelligence is. One of the first, the real problem is philosophical, if you will. You can't give what you don't have. And what we don't have is a real understanding of what intelligence really is. So how do you build it? I think we're far better off calling it'd be more precise to call it simulated intelligence. That's less sexy. It's not going to get, it won't attract as much capital, for the anthropics or whatever. But that's going to be the best we can do. It's a simulacrum of intelligence. But until we understand what it is, and there's no indication that we're going to get there anytime soon. So I don't really know what it's going to, as far as the AGI sort of thing goes. I personally, my money is on it won't happen. And again, just, if someone tells you go build
we'll create some really amazing tools in the process.
No doubt.
But that bigger goal.
Yeah.
I tend to agree with you.
Yeah.
And until an AI bot or whatever has a human nervous system, there are just many fundamental things that it cannot replace.
That's, when you get into the answer to what is intelligence, if we're thinking about mimicking human intelligence, I think you're spot on there. Look, it's so much more than a set of neurons firing, right? It's
Right.
sense, it's experience, it's sensation. Clearly the answer is a totality of humanity that we can perceive it, but we can't define it, let alone
Mhm.
replicate it. So I couldn't agree with you more. You're absolutely 100%
Well,
right.
so I want to make sure that people know how to get your book. We'll definitely, if you want to say the name of the book again,
Sure.
feel free to. We'll put it in the show notes. If people want to like reach out to you and talk to you and say, Barry, how can you help my organization? What's
Sure.
the best way for people to like follow your stuff or stay up on what you're up to?
Yeah, the best thing would be just go to my website, which is
Hmm.
argoshr.com. It's ARGOSHR.com.
Uh-huh.
The book is on Amazon, and it's called "It's All in Your Head: Why Psychology Doesn't Help Your Employees Deliver Value and What Can." There's the Kindle, the paperback, and the hardcover, and I think days away from the audiobook finally getting out. But anyway,
Awesome.
so that's really right around the corner. But
Awesome. Barry, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank
Jeff,
you
it's been great.
everybody for watching or listening on your chosen platform. If you want to see more interviews like this, make sure and follow the podcast. If you want to get more insights from me, sign up for my email list. I talk about overachievers and the engine that's running you and all kinds of themes that tend to get in our way. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you next time.